Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pastikas. I'm so glad you're here. With the Brave Women at Work podcast, you'll get the resources and tips along with real-world stories and humor to empower and inspire you to take bolder and braver actions in your career and life. Welcome to the Brave Women at Work podcast. This is your host, Jen Pastikas. I'm so glad you're here. Well, hey everyone, how are you doing out there? So there is this awesome book. It's an older book now, maybe a few years at least. It's called Carry On Warrior: The Power of Embracing Your Messy, Beautiful Life by Glennon Doyle. And if you do not know Glennon Doyle, she's a pretty famous author, so go and check her out. But when I think of the concept of carry on warrior or carrying on warrior, I think of Emily Zarecki. So, as you're going to hear in today's podcast, Emily is a warrior that has endured so many trials and tribulations in her life. And when I met Emily, I knew that she would have a story of bravery to inspire all of us that we can do hard things because we all face hard things, right? Whether it's illnesses or breakups of relationships, divorces, hardships with children, hardships with our own health. The list goes on. So I love to sprinkle in stories of bravery because this is called Brave Women at Work. So during my conversation with Emily, we chatted about how the passing of her mother and her husband impacted her and how she reacted after hearing her own breast cancer diagnosis. And it was kind of like one, not necessarily one right after the other, but it was just kind of this domino effect. What prompted her to write her book, Golden Scars: How the Death of My Husband Prepared Me to Battle Cancer. How Emily took care of herself while raising young kids of her own, including her twins. And the beautiful thing is now the kiddos are not so little anymore. And she's done a great job, Mama. So Emily has done a good job, and her children, now young adults, are thriving. I love the cover of this book. And so I asked her the story behind the book cover and the concept of golden scars. Emily's also in public relations and communications. That's been the duration of her career. So she shared her work with her company, Clarion Communications, and the importance of having a personal brand. So before we get started, here's a bit more about Emily. Emily Zarecki is a seasoned communications and public relations professional. Her 25-year career spans global Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies, nonprofit, and agency settings. Completing treatment for breast cancer not only gave Emily a new perspective on her life, but the experience ignited a flame to do more writing and storytelling. After parting ways with a marketing agency in 2021, she founded Clarion Communications and is its lead consultant and chief storyteller. Passionate about a few causes close to her heart: mental health, suicide prevention, and breast cancer awareness, Emily has served on the board of Unison Health in Toledo and led fundraising efforts for the National Association of Mental Illness, NAMI, Toledo, in memory of her husband, Steve. Emily is enthusiastic about advocating for research and education about breast cancer and eliminating disparities in access to diagnostics and treatment. She serves as an advocacy ambassador for Susan G. Komen. Emily lives in Sylvania, Ohio with her husband, Mark, and their 3 children. So if Brave Women at Work has made an impact on you, please be sure to share it with a family member, a friend, or a colleague. You know that I'd love to get this show in the hands of more women, and you can do that by sharing it on socials and also leaving a rating and review. It takes just a minute to leave. Let's leave a 5-star, shall we? leave a 5-star review for me. Or if you want to write a couple sentences about how this show may have impacted you, I would love it. It really helps fuel me to find you amazing guests and to share from my heart stories of vulnerability and stories of how I have been learning to be a brave woman at work right alongside you. And if you've already left a rating and review, I thank you. I really thank you. I hope this comes sincerely through either the audio waves or if you're seeing this on YouTube. And yes, I do have a channel on YouTube now, so go check it out. But I just thank you. And if you haven't yet downloaded my freebies from my website, check them out at bravewomanatwork.com. The freebies are 24 career and leadership affirmations, 5 ways to managing your imposter syndrome, and getting paid 10 negotiation tips. If I had my clients on the show, you would know that I am passionate about all of these areas, but especially making sure that you guys get the pay and benefits that you deserve and we close that wage gap. So go check out all of them, but especially pay attention to the negotiation tips freebie and their workbook style guides. So you can kind of write notes in there. I try to make them very self explanatory. So go check them out on my website. Again, bravewomanatwork.com. Last announcement is you may not know I offer this service, but I offer something called the Brave Circle. It is a drop in coaching circle for women that are really looking to understand what is coaching? Could coaching benefit me? Um, I have an issue with something professionally. I just want to kind of see. And so the coaching circle contains the following. So it gives you access to a once a month kind of group coaching experience where you can bring your challenges, you can bring your professional questions, you can bring maybe mindset, anything that you have going on, I can help you with. And then the power is the power of community. So you can share among other women. And it's really cool because women, like, the rising tide lifts all boats. So the women in the community want to help you too. So they might share, well, this is what I've done and this is what I've done. And it's just a really beautiful experience. So there's that. And then, of course, we do semi-annual planning sessions so that your goals just don't sit on the shelf. We really put those down on paper. And we just did our first one here in January 2025. And it was just a really cool experience. And lastly, I do special podcasts. So there is a separate private secret, the Brave Circle podcast. And I would love for you to get access to that. So all of that information is on my website. And if you're wondering, like, what does this cost, Jen? Is this just like out of realm? No, it's $97 a month. So if you're looking to kind of get used to coaching or you're kind of like trying to figure it out, go check out the website and look to see if the Brave Circle is right for you. And if you do have questions on it, you can just schedule a discovery call with me. It's absolutely complimentary to see if you want to do individual coaching or if you want to join the Brave Circle. All right, let's welcome Emily to the show. Well, hello, Emily. Welcome to Brave Women at Work. How are you today?
Hello, I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Of course, of course. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your background story and how you've gotten to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, about me, I grew up in Cincinnati and went to college here in kind of Northwest Ohio. And kind of life, moving along as I kind of quote had kind of seen the kind of plan unrolling. I studied journalism and PR in school,
Mm,
had an absolute love for writing and initially wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. And studied public relations and, out of school, worked in both corporate and nonprofit settings and later on in agency settings. And as they say, kind of life was going on and going kind of according to the plan and until it wasn't. I
mm,
was married with 3 young children, and my husband died unexpectedly, and that was kind of the start of this, search of the kind of new normal. I knew nothing was going to be the same, from that point on, and really
mm,
figuring out what's next and what does this mean for me in terms of Emily on her own, Emily as a mom, Emily as, still wanting to be a, corporate, person trying to continue to, grow in my career. So it was a big life-changing moment.
Well, and there's more in your book which we're going to talk about today, but your husband passes, so if that wasn't enough, right? You lost your mom to late
Hmm.
stage ovarian cancer.
Right.
And well, I'd love to, if you're open to it and want to talk about her. It sounds like you guys had a really beautiful bond and relationship.
We did,
And
yes.
then you were, a caregiver through her illness, then you're raising three children. You just skipped over that, like, one son and like twins. Hello. And then you had your own illness.
Yes.
So I mean, come on, like, you got to keep going with that story, because how did you
Right.
keep going, like, on the darkest of days? Because I have never lost a spouse. I lost my father, so I saw my mother go through it young,
Hmm.
and I saw her pain through the eyes of a child, which is not the same. But
Right.
I know how hard it was for her.
Hmm.
So then you lose, your mom, and I don't know in what stage, so you're gonna have to keep filling in the gaps of this
Sure.
story. But, your mom and then yourself, like, in what chronology, or like in what time frame was all of this, and how did you find the courage and the bravery to keep going?
Sure. So my husband died in 2009.
Mm,
So that's crazy that it's been, now 15 years that
yeah.
he has passed. So I was, 35, and my
Wow.
children, as you mentioned, my son was 8 at the time, had just turned 8, and my daughter's twin girls were 4. So,
Wow.
yes. So it was just, I mean, a stop in your tracks. What in the heck happened? I mean, it was just like, meteor hit, and trying to just understand it all and figure out what's next. And in those, early dark days, it was absolutely my children that kept me moving forward. The days that I would just want to stay in bed, covers over my head, leave me alone. I just want these days to pass on by. And I knew that I couldn't do that. I had these three, amazing little ones, looking at me to help them figure out what's next, and to try to keep us on, a regular routine there. It was the summer, when it happened, but just, a month later, we're getting ready to go back to school. And they absolutely were my driving force in making sure that, no, you've got to get up each day. You've got these three little ones who need your guidance. And they definitely were the ones to keep me going.
Wow. And then when did your mom get sick? So in what year was that?
Yeah, so quite a bit of time had happened. So my mother got sick in November of 2018.
Okay,
And
so
then so
a
that's when
while.
she was diagnosed, and then she passed away just a year later
Okay.
in
Oh, wow.
November of 2019.
Okay, wow. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for all of your losses.
Thank you.
Condolences. Yeah.
Thank you.
And what was your connection to your mom like? What was your relationship like?
Oh, we were so very close from the time I was just little. I mean, I absolutely adored my mom, looked up to her. We had a really great relationship, even through the teenage years. I mean, I felt like it
Mm,
was, you've got your, teen hormone, trying to figure things out, irritable, the normal teen stuff, but it was
yeah.
pretty normal. I mean, I didn't can't say I was a terrible, teenager. But I mean, through it all, we were so very close. I mean, just she was my mom, she was my best friend.
Oh, wow.
We look so much alike. I mean, I will find myself now looking at pictures and just get struck by how much we look alike. And so I mean, it's certainly something that, I love and carry with me. And, I often think of just different things either that she would say, or I could just imagine, her thinking, like reminding me, she was a nurse. So did you get your flu shot yet? Did you get your flu shot? So I can just imagine her in my head, during times of, what I need to do. And the loss, was definitely just so huge when you lose a parent. And I was really feeling it. We just marked 5 years that she has been gone, and I was really feeling it before Christmas, just missing her so much. And I mean, we always lived relatively close together. It was let's see, it was about a month before my son was born. My parents actually moved closer to me. They had talked about, retiring. Most people retire and think south, but my parents went north to northern Ohio. They were gonna, live along the lake. My dad had a
Yeah.
sail, and it was just such a beautiful time that here that I'm about to have our first child, and my parents are moving close to us, so they were there, and when whenever it would be just, a tough time, or my parents would call, I'd be like, hey, we want to, take Steven or the girls for the weekend. And I was like,
Mm.
fantastic. That's wonderful. But they were always just there and there to help out. And I couldn't imagine not having them close when my husband Steve died. I mean, they were just my rock when
Oh, thank goodness.
when I just, wasn't even able to think clearly about what do we need to do? What do I need to do first? And do I stay in this house? Do I move? They were right there helping me through it all.
Mm. And thank you for bringing up something I think is really people gloss over, at least, in terms of, we're both, you're on communications and marketing. It's all, in the same kind of family.
Right.
No one really talks about, feeling loss at the time of the holiday, right? Or,
Mhm.
on those major moments, when we get the catalogs in the mail. I still get a catalog from Amazon, by the way. They still kick it old school with paper sometimes. No one says, hey, you may feel grief during this time. It's all about the toys and the
Right.
glossiness of the holiday. And so thank you as we're recording this of kind of normalizing that. So for anyone that is feeling loss during the holiday or as we're starting into 2025, we see you. We feel you
Absolutely.
and that it's okay. And that I would just say, and whatever advice you have, Emily, I would say to don't push it away, like feel into it, right? Like don't let it
Yes.
swallow you whole, but um, feel into it and give yourself as
Mhm.
much grace and compassion because my dad, I was just counting the years as you were talking about this. I'm like, okay, how long has my dad been gone? It's been 29 years, by the way. And the grief, the waves still come. They still can
Mhm.
come, and you don't even know when they're going to come, and then they're like, oh, there it is. Oh, there it
There
is.
it
And
is. Yeah.
you just have to let it kind of like a wave, you just let it kind of like crash over you, right? And you just like,
Yes.
kind of like wave into it. You don't like try to brace against it because then it makes it even worse. So,
It
any
does.
you
You're
have any
right.
feedback for anyone that might, be feeling some grief, during the holiday and how they, navigate through that?
Yeah, I love what you said about just letting yourself feel it, because I definitely, felt early in my grief after losing Steve. I mean, that's the first time I had lost, someone so close to me. I mean, I have, grandparents, but to have, I mean, your partner, gone, and in some of those even early years, I'd want to kind of fight against it, feeling like the grief coming, and it was like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. It's hard, it hurts. But I definitely learned, through the years of, if you don't lean into it and feel the feelings, it'll just wait there for you. It just kind of
Hmm.
waits because it's going to come back. And as you said, there are the grief that comes in waves. And there are times where it's just kind of, it's there. You kind of feel it on the surface, like it's just kind of, water's kind of floating around you. But then there are other times where it's just a wave that it feels like it just knocks you to your knees. And I do find that it's so important to take that time, give yourself some time, and feel it, and do what it is you feel like you need to do. I mean, there were times where I just felt like I just need to go to the cemetery. I need to go, stop and see my mom, or, go out and for my husband, Steve, he wanted to be cremated. It was kind of a weird thing because I mean, he was young, he was 44,
Hmm.
and it was more of a joking thing, if that sounds kind of very odd, but that I knew he wanted to be cremated. So he was a wildlife biologist, and
Oh,
he would jokingly say, when it's my time, I've taken enough, space on this earth. Just, I want to be cremated. We lived near Lake Erie, just, circle of life thing. So
interesting.
it
Okay.
was, kind of odd that as he was, relatively young, I knew that was what he wanted. So we, and I had always had just this tradition, I guess. It was, when someone dies, they're buried, you go to a cemetery. But with Steve, I thought I might not have that. But will going to the lake help me and feel like I'm near him? And
Mm.
it really does. I mean, I wasn't sure that it would because it seemed so different. But there were just times where I'd have to stop and think of when I'm feeling this grief, when it feels hard and I'm really, missing him, what do I need? And, there may be times where I was like, I just need to go out to the lake. I need to just be and kind of let those feelings come. And, so often, whether it was going to the cemetery to visit my mom or going to the lake, that I would feel some peace and some calm. Like, okay, I can now carry on. Like I gave myself some of that time, let myself feel, and there's not anything about forgetting it. It's there with you, but I feel like I'm able to carry on.
You know what? Thank you for sharing that. I've never thought about that for those that, aren't buried in the quote unquote traditional, way
Right.
that you
Right.
found, solace in a new place,
Yes.
in place of nature. And I just think that's so comforting. So thank you for sharing that. Because I think I believe these podcasts take the shape that they need to. And I think someone needs to hear, if they're feeling grief, as they're listening to this, like, hey, this is how we can deal with it. So,
Right.
okay. So if that wasn't enough, right? So now
Right.
we've talked about your mom, we've talked about your husband, and then now you get cancer. So when
Yeah.
did that happen? And tell us the story about that.
Yes. So I was we were in 2020 in the throes of COVID, and I was a few months late in getting my regular mammogram.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think it was that little nudge from my mom, like, it's time, right? You still need to get your mammogram. You've got
Mm.
this global pandemic going
Thank
on.
goodness. Thank goodness for your mom, for
I
real.
know, thank
Okay.
goodness for her, because I was definitely, could hear it. And so it was early October of 2020. And I, scheduled my regular mammogram. And when I got the call back to say, we're going to need to do some additional testing, we couldn't see anything. You have dense tissue. And there was a second where I was more not concerned, but irritated because the same thing had happened the year before.
Mm.
Got my mammogram. They said, you have dense tissue. We can't see anything. You need to have an ultrasound. And, have the ultrasound. Everything looks great. We'll see you next year. I thought, okay. And then when it happened again, I thought, okay, if I have this dense tissue, do I no longer need to have mammograms? Because if you can't see
Mm.
anything, why am I even doing that? But I thought, let me just put that aside. That's maybe an issue I can, tackle at another time. Let's schedule this next test, and hopefully it'll just be a repeat of last year. So I had the ultrasound scheduled. So this was maybe just another, week or so later. And what was nice was that I was told, and had experienced it the year before, you have the ultrasound, and there is a radiologist that will be there that will read the test right away.
Oh,
So
that's
you will
awesome.
go home knowing
Mm-hmm.
everything's fine, or we found something, we're gonna, maybe need to do a biopsy. So as I was, waiting after the ultrasound, I was just waiting there. There was a knock at the door, and the tech comes in back into the room, but there was someone else standing behind her. And that was my
Mm.
first little indication that this isn't the same as last year. I have a feeling they're not telling me, if a radiologist is coming into the room, that everything's fine. We'll see you next year. So I initially just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach, just seeing, a woman in a lab coat standing behind that radiology tech.
Mm.
So they come into the room, and she shows me a spot on the screen that they're concerned about. And she says, I am 90% sure this is a fibroadenoma, just a benign mass of tissue. But we still need to do a biopsy. But she said, I am 90% sure that's what this is. So I was like, okay. So I was able to kind of walk out of there a little concerned, but not feeling like, uh-oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
So I at least felt like, okay, 90% odds are good. I'm gonna lean into that. But had to have a biopsy done. So scheduled that, and that was able to happen just a few days later. So it was like, okay, let's just keep this moving. And went in, had the biopsy done, and then it was the waiting game. I knew I'd have to wait a few
Mm.
days for the test to come back, and trying to, still stay positive and think maybe this is just benign. Let's, stay as positive as possible. And I was, trying to just focus on my work, and just kind of knowing it would be a few days. And when about the time I thought I was going to kind of either, get the call from my doctor's office, I first got a notification on my phone. There's a new test result in your My Chart. I don't know. I mean, I took a class in medical terminology in college. I don't know
Hmm.
those. But of course, I went right in there to look at the result.
Of
Not that
course.
it's like a foreign language, but I was just kind of scrolling through it. And I think in my mind, it was just like, I need to see that this is negative, and I'm just trying to scroll through anything I can find that says negative.
Negative. Hmm.
So I'm seeing a few things negative. I'm like, okay, I really don't know what that says. I think we're good. But a little while later, I get a phone call, and I see it's my doctor's office calling. And I was just fully expecting to hear that familiar voice of the woman from the front office that always called and said, everything looked good. We'll see you next year. And so I answered the phone, not super chipper, but it's kind of positive feeling. And I'm wondering why this isn't that woman at the front office. This is not
Hmm.
her voice. It's my nurse practitioner calling me.
Mm.
And I'm not processing what she's saying, because I'm thinking, why is she calling me? I never hear from her with a test result. And I had to stop her and say, did you just say I have cancer? And she said, yes. And
Mm.
I was just, I mean, it was like I felt the world stop. I mean, it was just that, we got off the phone, and I remember her saying before we got off the phone, I want to get you into, see an oncologist, as quickly as possible. So it's just hearing cancer and then oncology. I mean, it was just this surreal moment that I'm just sitting there at my little COVID office space in my basement, because I thought it was just going to be this temporary little space.
Yes.
And it just felt like everything went quiet, like everything just stopped for a minute. And I pulled back that test result, and I was like, I'm just curious, what did I miss? And I scrolled by in bold letters, invasive ductal carcinoma. Scrolled right by it. It's like, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the word negative.
Wow. Wow.
But there it was, that I had cancer. And yeah, it was just this real surreal moment, like, okay, nothing is now the same. I
Again.
just lost again. I just lost my mom. We're now just coming up on the year mark. And now I'm facing cancer.
What
It
stage were you in? What stage did they diagnose you in?
it was stage one.
Okay,
So
good.
fortunate, caught it early. I think having we do have breast cancer in our family.
Mm.
So, I was, in the routine of getting a mammogram every year since I had turned 40.
Hmm.
So, fortunately, you know, tested every year. Just a few months, had I put it off, during the 2020. But so fortunately, it was caught early.
Oh, thank goodness. And so what steps did you take to, take care of yourself and get to the point of healing? And thank goodness. So that means you're coming up upon 4 years. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Well,
yes, yeah.
congratulations. I know that
Thank
that is a
you.
big deal. And another, because my dad he did not have breast cancer, although men can get breast cancer. He had
Right.
kidney cancer, and
Hmm.
he ended up passing from kidney cancer. But during the years of his remission, and I understand how important every year that marks. It's just like, all
Right,
right, it's good. Like you take a little bit of a deeper breath, a little bit of a deeper breath, a little bit. So,
right.
congratulations on your 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So during the one bit of information I did not fill in during my little timeline, so I did marry again in
Mm,
2015. So I gosh,
congratulations.
coming
Yeah.
up on 10 years already. Um,
Congrats, congrats.
Thank you. So my husband Mark and my children, now that they were, a bit older, were, my rock. Absolutely. I mean, as soon as I found out, I went, upstairs and went into Mark's office and told him, and he's like, but I thought it was, she was so sure it was benign. I'm like, well, it's not. I knew she couldn't, say for certain that they'd have to do the biopsy, but I think we were both trying to, not that we were in denial, but I guess it was just such shock that I just did not see this coming.
Mm,
And so, we were, it was kind of like our little bubble here. The kids were doing school remotely, Mark and I both working from home. So it was just like this little kind of bubble. And took some time, told the kids, and I really wanted to just, especially with the girls, they were a little bit younger. My son at the time was finishing college and studying nursing. So
mm,
I knew he could have a different, bit of a different, understanding of it than the girls. But all three of my kids had been so close to my mom because of, my parents being so close when Steve died, and they saw my parents all the time. So they had just formed such a close relationship with my mother. And I wanted to, as I was telling the girls, letting them know, like, my cancer is not what grandma had.
mm,
Two different types of cancers. Mine was caught very early. Going into it as I was very scared, but trying to be positive as well. I definitely had
hmm
that feeling of the mind body connection. And I thought, I don't know what I'm in for. I don't know what my treatment is yet going to look like, but I know I've got to go into it thinking positively and feeling
hmm
okay. I don't know what I'm in for, but and I think early on, as we were just meeting with the oncologist, it was having to kind of tap into those horrible, hard things I've been through in my past, losing Steve, watching my mom go through, cancer treatment, and having to kind of tap into that strength I drew from those hard experiences to be able to face cancer treatment.
So tell me about the timeline on the book, right? So it's interesting. When I wrote my first women's anthology, my husband was like, "Why do you have to share, your story?" And I was like, "Because it's part of the healing process for me and for
Yeah,
every woman that reads this chapter." And I didn't
right.
write a whole book. I wrote a chapter. So it was like my first foray into publishing. But for me, it was my story.
Yes.
And it felt really good. So I'm wondering if it was the same for you and like what prompted you to write your book and the title of the
Mhm.
book. And I do want to talk about the cover because I'm in love with the cover of your book. But anyway,
Thank
so
you.
it's called Golden Scars. So Golden
Yeah.
Scars, How the Death
Golden
of My
scars.
Husband Prepared Me to Battle Cancer. So what prompted you to write the book?
So we're now kind of advancing to 2021. So I had a year-long treatment
Hmm
plan. It was in three different phases. And when I first heard, what the treatment plan was going to be, my heart did sink when I heard chemo. I mean, I just immediately could envision, pictures that we see, of somebody, who's lost their hair, they've maybe lost a lot of weight. And I thought, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to. So I had a
Yes.
kind of three-phase treatment. So I would start with chemo, surgery, and then I had, gosh, was it maybe 5 months then of immunotherapy?
Oh, wow. So very, very, like they were very aggressive with the plan. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I learned that the type of cancer I had was very aggressive. It was called HER2 positive,
Okay.
and that it was a fast growing cancer, but it also responded very well to the treatment. So I definitely went into it thinking I really don't know what I'm going into and facing with chemo, but I knew that this type of cancer did respond well to the kind of standard of treatment with the, four medicines I would be getting. So I was going into it with, if you follow this treatment plan, that it's a 90% cure rate. He said, and the oncologist, made sure he emphasized that. He said, I'm not saying that this is treatable. He said, it is very treatable. It responds to treatment, but there is a 90% chance you will be cured. That it,
Oh, wow.
from.
Okay. Okay. That's amazing.
So it was really amazing. And I thought, okay, I'm fully leaning into, my treatment, my doctor and the other team that I'm gonna go into this. It's gonna be hard, but I've got this, solid feeling, at the end of it that I will be, among that 90%.
Hmm.
And so as I was getting through, the coming through the hardest parts of treatment, so I was on, the other side of surgery, and I was getting the every 3 weeks an infusion of these immunotherapy drugs. So they did not have the harsh, side effects that the chemo drugs did. So it's really during that time, the fall of 2021, that I just really started kind of reflecting back first on, okay, look at what you've been through, and most recently thinking the cancer, and what do I want now? And I was first
Mm.
thinking in terms of my career. I had been working for a marketing agency for many years, and I thought, I'm missing writing, doing, when I had different jobs within, PR and communications, so much of it was related to writing. And I thought I really missed that. And, I wonder if maybe this is an opportunity. I think back now is kind of crazy to thinking of, like, maybe I want to do something different, in terms of my job. And
Mm.
in, some conversations with a now a dear friend, I remember her first saying, "You should write a book." And I thought, I the initial thought of it just seemed so daunting. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
I write, for a living. I don't write, a long, drawn out, 50,000 word, memoir. So it initially felt very daunting to me. But as I sat with the idea, and I realized during the different difficulties in my life, first as a, young widow, and then, later navigating breast cancer, that I would go out and search for other stories of women who've been through similar experiences.
Mm.
Um, when I was, 35 and widowed, it completely shattered what I envisioned of. I always imagined a widow as, somebody, 70s, 80s. They've had a long
Hmm.
life, long marriage, perhaps. And I just couldn't even fathom, what does a 35-year-old widow even look like? I mean, it was just like, I didn't know anyone my age that was widowed. And so over time, I'd start to just kind of seek out, stories online, or
Mm.
when I would learn of, I remember being in a bookstore and, just kind of walking through, and I remember seeing the title of a book, Widows Wear Stilettos. And I thought, I first of all love that title. And I was like, oh, okay, so there have to be other young widows out there who are continuing to live and maybe continue in their career, or just you know, wear those stilettos. So I thought, all right, I've got to learn a little bit more about this. And I discovered online this incredible community. It's an organization called Soaring Spirits International, and they host now multiple times a year, but they hosted an event that I first heard the name of, and I was like, I just have to look into this. It's called Camp Widow. I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
I just hearing those two words, I'm like, I need to learn more. So I Googled and went to the website, and seeing the homepage of the website appear, it was like I found my people.
Oh,
I'd
so
just seen
good.
images of other young women, young men and women at an event. And I thought, I've got to go to this. I've got to go to this. And I saw that it was, a few months from then in San Diego. I'm like, I can handle going to San Diego, but it was also completely out of my norm to just want to, on my own, by myself, pick up and go across the country to an event where I knew not a soul. But it was the most impactful, supportive, loving community of people. It was, walking into, I mean, I'm going to guess that it was an early event that they had. So there were probably 150 people there, maybe.
Wow.
It ranged from the youngest, I think, was 21, from,
Wow.
military widow to this sweet older man who I think was 80 was there. And every age in between, every reason that somebody was widowed. I mean, we had a war going on, so there were a lot of military widows, people who had, their spouses had an illness or cancer, suicide, 9/11. There were, two women there whose one, it was her fiance, and another one, her husband, that were at the World Trade Center that day.
Wow. Wow.
And so it was just the most incredible community of people who just got it. They fully understood. It's not like you have to take 10 minutes to explain, here's what's going on and what you're feeling. It's just you're going deep into communication and conversation.
Yeah.
And then later, as I was looking out about, women navigating breast cancer and, what's chemo going to be like? And, what about surgery? I've never had I've had, C-section, but I'm like, this is a major surgery I'm going into. I had a double mastectomy, and I was going out in search of those stories. And so there was a part of me that said, you've got one heck of a story to tell, not only your cancer journey, but you were widowed and helping your young children navigate grief. And how
It's
do
a
you navigate
wow.
grief and
Yeah.
move forward? So it almost felt like I really had to do this. I almost felt this obligation to other people who may navigate, because I know I'm not the only, woman who's been widowed and then had to deal with cancer. I have, met through, Soaring Spirits, or through, my different communities through breast cancer, other people who have, navigated some of those same stories. But I felt like for both healing, but then also to help someone as they're beginning, a journey that they maybe never saw coming, but to kind of help them with my story and share my experience, the
Mm.
good and the ugly and kind of everything in between.
Well, let's talk about the cover for a minute because I want to talk about like why golden scars, right? So,
Mhm.
you have the cover behind you. So for someone that's
Yeah.
watching the video, it's this beautiful, it's a bust of a woman, right? And
Mhm.
is that, like what you would see in a beautiful, like the Louvre or, one of the art museums or
Yes.
whatever. It's just gorgeous. And the color of the blue is beautiful. But
Mhm.
why golden scars? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, so early on, in kind of navigating grief, I had learned about a Japanese art form called kintsugi,
Mm-hmm.
and looked into it, and really saw it as a symbol of kind of grief and, how do you move forward. that so in this art form, when an object, whether it's pottery, ceramic, something is broken, these ancient Japanese artisans would repair the porcelain or
Mhm.
whatever object it was, but they would repair it with gold. So the object that you would see, you could still see the crack from the fact that it was broken, but yet it was, repaired with this, beautiful, strong material, but that became part of that object's story. And I just loved the symbolism and how it related to grief, because I certainly felt so broken inside. It was just shattered, losing Steve, and realizing that this is part of who I am. It's going to the experience, the widowhood and later cancer would shape who I am. And I just loved that symbolism of being able to kind of carry forward with these scars that some you see, some you may not, but that it becomes part of our story, and how we can then share that experience with other people, and that it can become, yes, it was hard, and if I had the choice, I wouldn't choose to go through
Of
this, but
course.
we're
Yes.
not
Yes.
given those, all those choices in life. There are things that happen to us, and we then can choose what we do with that experience. And, I easily could have chosen to, stayed sad and, maybe gotten a little bitter that I was so young and my husband died, but I knew I didn't want to live that way, and that I had to continue moving forward, trying to find, the brightness and happiness in life. I knew that's something Steve would want. And so I think in those hard times, we can find a light and a lesson. I mean, we learn lessons in the challenges of our life, not in when everything is going beautifully.
Hmm.
So as I was talking with the graphic designer who was going to create the cover art, I shared, that story about kintsugi, and I thought I really love that idea. And I think we had already had the title narrowed in on Golden Scars, and so the graphic designer said, "Okay, I'm gonna get to work." And she came back with a couple different options, and this cover, we only made one slight modification to the cover. So it is largely how she presented it to me. But in the original design, the gold feathers were kind of small, kind of at the base of the female form. And I asked the designer just the meaning behind the feathers. I was really curious. I said, "I like them. I'm just curious kind of what you thought." And she said, often if someone sees a feather, it can be a symbol of maybe from, people who have,
Hmm.
gone before, that, you're on the right path, kind of keep moving forward. And I told her, I said, I love that. I said, but I have another reason why I really love the feathers. And so, as I had mentioned, Steve was a waterfowl biologist, did a lot of research in, birds in along the lake and the migration patterns. But one of his, I think, really key and such an impactful project he worked on, it was actually, he had started it around the time that we met, and it was reintroducing trumpeter swans to Ohio and to the Lake Erie
Hmm.
region, that they had been on the endangered species list. And as soon as I was sharing that story, we were on a Zoom call, and I could just see both my editor and the graphic designer just like, all right, she's like, I have to do something with those feathers. So she came back with them, really prominent in the cover design. So I absolutely love it too. I was like, I have to get that poster size. I
Yes,
I
you
love
do.
the colors, the gold. It just I love the symbolism in it. And when I share the
Hmm.
story about the feathers, and it just seems to be like it just
Meant
was
to be.
meant to be,
Yes.
and really came together, full circle. And it was right about the time the book was published. So it was published in April of this year, 2024. And there was a news article that had come out that the trumpeter swans in Ohio had, reproduced and were flourishing, that they were
Oh,
taken off the endangered species list.
oh, that's
And I was
amazing.
like, I mean, the timing was just so beautiful. And, I just felt like, the work Steve did, and he was so passionate about, wildlife and the outdoors. And to see that just really come full circle was such a beautiful moment.
Oh, I love that story. I really, really do. And
Thank you.
just finishing off on the kintsugi idea, a lot of the women that listen to this and, not throwing stones, I too am a recovering perfectionist. And so when things kind of fall apart or crack or break, right, as a perfectionist, we're trying to like, we're sad and we're like, why can't we get them back to perfection?
Mhm.
And so I would
Right.
highly recommend my perfectionists, my recovering perfectionists out there to go and look this up because it might be a beautiful symbol for you too in your life and your work to say, you know what, things may fall apart, but they can come back together even in a more beautiful, new
Mhm.
way. It doesn't have to
Right.
be in the quote unquote perfection that came in its original. It can come to a new level of perfection. And so
Mhm.
I just wanted to leave that with you on this art form because I do think that it represents so many things.
Yes,
It's
absolutely. I was
beautiful.
really moved by that, just the symbolism of,
Hmm.
because I think we kind of see, at least I know I did, really saw kind of the path of my life and how I saw
Hmm.
it unfolding. And that was kind of the first time where I saw, well, there are things we are just not in full control of. And what do we do next, and how we respond is what really, I think, shapes us, and really shows our character in those moments of when things don't go right, whether it's in personal life or in our professional lives, how we
Exactly.
respond when something happens. And it's really what you choose to do with those moments, and whether it's a project that didn't end up going your way, maybe you were taken off a project or you didn't get a promotion. It's those times to really think, well, what now?
Well, speaking about that, it's a beautiful segue. You touched on it, but you go through all of this, trauma and change and things that you didn't select. It wasn't like, oh yes, I'll take cancer, please. I mean, like you had to like learn how to respond. Um,
Yes.
But you also decided in that, I don't know if it was after cancer, but I think it was that you were like, I don't want to be in corporate anymore. I want to take a risk. I want to leave my corporate position. I
Mhm.
want to start my own firm, which for anyone that wants to go look it up and we'll put it in the show notes is Clarion Communications. So was that also at the time where you were like, no, life is too short. I'm going to go and do my own thing?
It really was. As I was kind of doing some of that reflecting in kind of the fall of 2021, and thinking like, okay, you've, really been through, a life-changing moment, another, life-changing experience, really not a moment, an experience.
Hmm.
And it really kind of made me, shift that perspective and really think like, do I want to just kind of keep going through the motions, so to speak? I mean, the work I was doing, I was certainly, I liked the work. I loved clients that I was working with, but I was kind of in that account lead position where I was, working with clients, helping to develop the strategy for their organization from a marketing and communications perspective. And then I would work with our creative team to kind of help bring to life a marketing campaign, or whatever it would come out to be. But I felt like I was more of just like kind of keeping these different plates spinning. And I thought, I feel like I want to do more. Feeling like I was, really making an impact, but being able to really put so much of myself into my work too, in doing more writing. So I was at first kind of looking at two different professional paths. I was thinking, well, let me see what kind of jobs are out there. Do I want to just go into another maybe corporate environment or another, go to work for someone else? Or do I want to go off and, start a business on my own? So for a while, I was kind of going down and investigating the two different paths
Hmm.
until I got to a point, it was late. We're kind of getting ready to close out 2021. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to jump into it and start my business. So
So exciting. And
yeah.
I don't know who introduced this to me in the last few days. I was reading on another coach's site and she quoted this quote from Jim Carrey, if you don't mind if I read it, as the
Yeah.
impetus to her starting her business. And it is so motivational to me. So Emily, hopefully it's motivational. You've already been on this path, but more motivation for 2025 as though as anyone else that's like really pursuing a dream. So here's the quote. My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him, and so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. When I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job, and our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, but the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
I love that.
I mean,
Yes,
come on, mic drop. That is so powerful, right?
it is.
So
That
good for
it's
you.
very powerful because I too, I felt like, um, in talking with my husband about, maybe I want to, go off and, start my own business and really focus in on PR and strategic communications. And I remember him saying, but what about the, security of going to work for someone else? And I thought there really isn't a complete sense of job security anymore.
Not really.
Because I've had, been in a role where, a job was eliminated. I worked for, a,
Mm,
global corporate organization, here in Toledo. And so I definitely remember that of, having to cut costs, this job's been eliminated. We'd like you to apply for these other roles, but I remember thinking like there isn't that feeling of security that maybe we did have decades ago.
mm.
And so I thought I just really felt this kind of nudging me toward, go off on your own. If you feel like it, you can still look for other, roles and maybe do, a little bit of both. But as I thought about that, I'm like, no, I'm going to go all in. I want to, forge this path, start my own company and, work hard at it and see what happens.
That's so awesome. And you're 4 years into that too, correct?
I'm just starting my fourth year. Yes.
Woohoo! That's so exciting. It's really exciting.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
So when people think of, and I did too, so I wanted to weave in a little bit on the public relations end. So, people think PR, okay, it's needed for corporations, entrepreneurs, celebrities, large brands.
Right.
But what about, a woman that's listening today, an employee that's working in corporate?
Hmm.
And I'm just wanting for you to talk about, our own, public personas because everything is on the internet, like we have LinkedIn and like I guess the bigger question is does PR touch everyone, even, the 9 to 5 working woman? And
Yeah.
how do we manage our own brands or our own images online and, everywhere, really?
Right. Yeah, I absolutely think there is that personal brand that you need to um, really work on and focus on. Because for companies, a lot of people think, a brand, well, it's the name or the logo. But
Mm-hmm.
a brand is everything about a company. I mean, it's the how the person in customer service answers the phone, how they treat their customers. It's, the culture, it's everything about an organization. And when you apply that same thinking to an employee, to, that person, it's how you show up at work. Are you going in, you're a great employee, you get the job done and, go home, do your thing, totally fine. But are you also volunteering to lead a committee or
Mm,
join, an ERG, take on, a new project. And I kind of think about it as, if, a promotion's coming up, maybe your name is raised, in a room. What are people thinking about you? Kind of what's that conversation about? Are they saying like, she has got, such a great just attitude. She's engaged. We see her, participating on communities or leading this project. All of that is that kind of personal brand is, how you're showing up at work. You mentioned, LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite, social media platforms. But how is, somebody showing up on that? Are they, talking about their field and sharing maybe some interesting research or sharing something great their company is doing? I mean, all of that really creates the kind of brand for that person. And just really thinking about how are you going to be perceived and how do you want to be perceived, and taking steps to maybe volunteer for that committee or do something extra. All feeds into how you're perceived in the workplace, from your own employees to the C-suite.
hmm There is a book, I can't think of it right now. I'm trying to pull it up here, that I am listening to. I will find it. Um, and it is really, really, here it is. It's called Lead to Win. And here we go. So, Lead to Win. And so I will put that in the show notes. But one of the things I found really interesting in that book is the author talks about how do you want to be consumed as a leader. So, this is on like the leadership
Hmm.
side. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting word. Like,
That
how do
is
you
a
want,
really interesting word.
right? Like, how do you want to be consumed or taken in, right? Because
Hmm.
consuming is like we're taking you in, right?
Right,
Consuming a consumption. And I
right.
was like, it just like stuck to me. I'm like, okay. So I think that we're not trying, Emily and I, as we're talking, we're not trying to give you more work to do, right?
Right.
But we want to bring something to your mind's eye is that you are responsible for how you are consumed and how you are presenting yourself in the world
Hmm.
for consumption.
Right.
So we know we talk on the podcast about, raise your hand, ask the question, volunteer, take on a new project, um, know when to say no, like all of like the
Right.
elements of female leadership personally and professionally. But
Hmm.
what you're doing is you're weaving your own story, that we're talking
Absolutely.
about, right?
Yeah.
And so that's all we want you to be mindful of, and just to be thinking about it. You don't need
Hmm.
to be like, okay, I'm going to put like, an hour on building my brand today, unless you really want to. And
Right.
if you do, I recommend to my clients 15 minutes a day on LinkedIn is always a beautiful 15 minutes to spend to
Yes.
engage in the conversation online, to add valuable commentary, to add your own commentary, because it will pay dividends as your network online grows and people, recruiters see you online contributing.
Right.
And I know it might be like, ugh, why do I have to do all this? But it's just a fact of life is that you are weaving your own brand with every conversation, everything you
Hmm.
do. It's a
Absolutely.
fact.
Yeah. And you want to be the one writing that narrative about yourself, putting, that out there versus, kind of leaving it to how people may perceive you. Maybe you are a little more quiet and you're introspective, you're listening, and during brainstorming sessions you're kind of taking it in because we all show up and have strengths. And I know in for me, for example, like in a brainstorming session, I am not great in that rapid fire, let's throw out answers. I'm one, I need to kind of take information in first, kind of process it and think about it. But when you are kind of that, quieter person, that doesn't mean that you're not there participating, but how are you contributing to, that project, or still, showing up? That it's just your way of how you write the story about you, and how you were saying how you want to be presented, and how it is that you show up.
So just be thinking about that and, how you want to show up, how you want to be consumed, or how you want to be taken in by other people, because it does make a difference in the arc of your career. So, rounding us out, I ask every guest, would love your perspective on this. So, what are 1 to 2 ways that you believe women can be braver at work today?
Yeah, I just love that concept of, being brave, and, brave at work. Um, for me, some things that really, really stick out are, really, raising your hand, speaking up, and, asking for what you want. I know in some roles I've had in the past, when I felt like, I feel like I'm ready for that next step. Um, there were times where I'd kind of wait. I wasn't sure how promotions were maybe handled at a company, or, at the agency I used to work for. So at first it's just kind of, understanding of like, I'm want to make an impact, show, what I can do, ask for a little bit more. But when it felt like, okay, I've now been in this position for about 4 years, I feel like I've, been doing more, I want to do more. I got to the point where I was having a conversation with my supervisor, and I just asked, what will it take for me to get from being in the supervisor role? I want to jump to director. And
Mm.
and I felt like that was, something that definitely took a little bit of courage. And there's no one really out there, necessarily, watching. They may be, watching your work, but in terms of, that promotion, sometimes you've got to be in the driver's seat. So really to just, ask for what you want. And I think another thing is just kind of put yourself out there, and join different committees, or look at some of the employee resource groups, and really get involved. And especially if it's not something that you're, maybe used to doing, or you kind of feeling like, well, would that be, something that's taking away from my work? But all of those experiences, in the workplace, really shape you, and, help you get to know other people from different departments, for example. And so, I definitely would say is, speak up, ask for what you're looking for, what you want, in your job, and, also get involved.
Yep, get visible, basically. It's all
Yes,
about advocacy, self-advocacy, because if you're not visible, people will make assumptions on, oh, well, she's not as committed, or she doesn't really want this job, or
right.
maybe she's not the right person, because they're building their own narrative on you. So it kind of wraps our
Yes,
conversation in a bow on
yes.
brand, and you being your own PR person, because you
Hmm.
have to weave the story that you want woven and you want read and thought of when you're not
Right.
in the room. So no, I think
Exactly.
I think that's really great. So again, I'm going to mention the book name Golden Scars: How the Death of My Husband Prepared Me to Battle Cancer, and it's available on all major book outlets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then Emily's firm, Clarion Communications, if you need any support in that area. But how can women find you, and all the places for you online?
Yes, I love connecting with people. I'm on LinkedIn, also Instagram. I've gotten trying to be a little bit more, focused in how I'm kind of telling the story about my book. So I'm on Instagram, Emily Zarecki. So yeah, we'd love to connect with people. I also have a personal website that's about my book, emilyzarecki.com, and also have some information out there. I'm looking to do a little bit more speaking in the coming year.
Oh,
So
yay.
yes, would
Good.
love to connect with women, and help how I can.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for being brave and in sharing your story and stories of your own golden scars, to help yourself, of course, and to heal others, and just creating beautiful work in the world. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that's a wrap on my discussion with Emily today. I hope you found our conversation both valuable and inspiring. As a reminder, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The show is also available on any other podcast platform you enjoy. Until next time, show up, embrace your golden scars, and be brave.